Greetings to you. Regarding the common concerns about picky eating or poor appetite in children, many friends and viewers have reached out and asked us to explain this topic for them right here on this channel, in our series we call Medicine in Simple Terms. It is important to note that the most common type of issue we see is actually just a misconception or perhaps some unrealistic expectations coming from the parents themselves. Whether it's the father, the mother, or both of them. Now, I don't want to or can't give a percentage, like saying 80% or 90%, but I think if I were to guess, it's around that range. What does that mean? It means that for whatever reason, parents, and it's usually the mothers, have this kind of subconscious obsession about it, where they just really want their child to eat with a big appetite. But in reality, children, assuming they're healthy and there are no other issues, which is the case for the majority, they just eat as much as they need. So, for example, parents would come to see me, both of them petite. Then they'd say, "Our child doesn't eat at all." After examining them, I'd see that the child was actually at a perfectly healthy spot on the height and weight growth chart for their age. Then I'd tell them, look, the genetics from both the mother's side and the father's side are petite. Well, a petite body usually has a lower metabolism, eats less, and this child is just the same. It's just how they're built. So, genetics play an important role that we need to pay attention to. Sometimes it's the other way around. For example, the father's side is petite, but the mother's side isn't, they're larger, and the child takes after the father's side, or vice versa. In short, we have to consider the simple physics of the situation. A larger body mass means a higher consumption. Even for their basal metabolism, they need to consume more food, which naturally causes their intake to fluctuate. So, that's one factor. Another factor, as I mentioned, is the obsession, the parent's obsession. In any case, how is it diagnosed? It's the height and weight growth chart. You know, as one of our professors used to say about people trying to diet who'd insist, "I swear, doctor, I haven't eaten a thing, I'm not eating anything." He'd say, "Look, I believe whatever you say, but I trust the scale." So, here too, we have to rely on that scale and, measuring the child's height, we have to consider the child's height and weight. There are charts for different ages, for under 2 years old, for infants, and then, for children and adolescents. These charts vary, but they're available everywhere at health centers. Pediatricians have them, and you can actually find them online too, so you can measure the child's height and weight accurately. You can go and see for yourself if they fall between the maximum and minimum for their age, which is what they call the health path. That's what they used to call it back in the day. I'm not sure about now. That path that exists between the maximum and minimum, which is essentially the acceptable range for any age. So, since this was the most common type, I'll say it again. If you're in doubt and want to be sure, take them to a doctor or a health clinic to have their height and weight measured accurately, regardless of the child's age, to see if they're on the health path or not. Even if they're in the bottom 25% on that health path, it's fine, as long as their trajectory stays consistent. It's not like, for example, if this kid has been in the top 25%, doing great, and then suddenly drops down into the bottom 25%. A sudden drop needs to be investigated, yes, and I'll mention this again at the end, because if it's an acute case, that's a different story. So, in a normal situation, that same height and weight chart, which is very simple and doesn't require any special equipment, can tell you if the child is gaining weight properly right now. So, what I want to say is, if you see that the child is generally doing well, has no symptoms of illness, is playing, jumping around, and their height and weight are on the right curve, on the proper curve, even if you see that they're eating very little, you shouldn't be worried. So right now, we're talking about quantity, meaning we're talking about whether it's too little or too much. As for the quality, what they should eat, I'll talk about that a bit later. Regarding the bad habits that form in a child, parents don't pay attention, they don't have the patience, they get lazy, they don't stop it, and then those things happen. So, regarding the quantity of food, even if there's enough variety, well, sometimes someone says, "My child doesn't like meat at all." Alright, so what is our goal with meat? It's protein, right? So, if they like eggs, give them eggs, that's acceptable. There are plant-based proteins, combine them with those if they'll eat them, that's also acceptable. And it's not necessary for them to eat a large amount or a large volume at all. Again, I'm assuming their height and weight are on the right curve. Can you picture that? I don't know. If they don't like fish, let them eat chicken. If they don't like chicken, let them eat meat. If they don't like meat, let them eat eggs. Any kind of protein source, in any form, is acceptable to us. Look around to see which version they like, and they'll eat the amount they need. So, that's the most common scenario. Now, let's assume that no, this isn't a mistake by the parents, or a wrong expectation, or a wrong perception. Let's assume it's real. Now we want to look at that real type I mentioned, which is less common. Meaning, the X, it's the minority, right? It's the minority. If it's real, we can generally consider two root causes. Either it has psychological origins, or it has physical causes, right? Now, again, the psychological and environmental causes are more common than the physical ones. I mean, out of every 10 kids that parents bring in with the complaint that, hey, this kid isn't eating enough, 7 of them, in my opinion, 7 or 8 of them, fall into that first group. Meaning, when you look into it, you realize that these parents are the ones making the mistake. Maybe 2 or 3 of them are actually right, and then out of those 2 or 3, in my opinion, 2 of them have psychological, emotional, or even behavioral roots, meaning they have bad eating habits, and only 1 out of those 10 is truly a child who is eating less because of an actual physical illness. This was the point I wanted to make in this. I mean, my main message in this video, in this file, is for you to pay attention to this issue. Okay, now regarding what are the psychological and environmental origins like? Like stress. A child who, for any reason, is under stress that they might not express, might not put into words, well, it might be hidden. This child's appetite decreases, right? The stress might be chronic, it might be long-lasting. Parents need to understand this. It is possible to figure it out. Pay attention to the child's activities and their moods, because stress doesn't just show itself by eating less. Stress has other symptoms too, you know. The child might have trouble sleeping, might seem scared, or might be traumatized, emotionally traumatized, you know. Or it could be recurring trauma. For example, due to, let me put it this way, well, many things, arguments, conflicts between the parents, or just anything else. For example, separating the child's sleeping space from the parents, and many other things that, thankfully, parents nowadays are quite aware of. And another type that is, this is common, it's even more common than the previous situation. It's poor eating habits. What does that mean? It means you should know that any sweet or salty food, creates an appeal. The combination of sugar and salt creates even more appeal. It's like that for everyone, regardless of whether they're an adult or a child. Meaning it causes the brain to get used to this food. Why do they say, for example, not to give a baby sugar water or anything sweet while they're still breastfeeding? Because if they eat something sweet, they won't want breast milk anymore since it's bland. Well, this same principle applies until a person is 90 years old. It holds true for the rest of their life. Meaning if the brain gets used to sweetness, it's like endorphins. It's like the substances someone gets addicted to when they use drugs. A similar mechanism happens in the brain. When we eat sweet things and get used to them, it means a kind of brain addiction occurs. If you've also kept a pet, for example, let's say you have a dog, right? If you feed this dog fatty, sugary, and all that kind of stuff, it gets used to this food and its lifespan gets shorter. And that so-called factory-made food that has everything the dog's body needs but doesn't taste like anything, it won't eat that, right? If you haven't gotten them used to sweets and fats and, I don't know, saltiness, and dogs actually get used to these spices and saltiness too. I mean, just like us, they like their food to be flavorful rather than eating something that's salt-free, sugar-free, and sour-free, and all that. Well, that healthy food, the food you buy for them in packaging in the form of pellets and those little kibbles, that's what they should be eating in principle. If they eat that, their lifespan will be longer, but it's bland. Well, it's the same with kids. So, if you're not paying attention to a child, if you're inattentive, one of those neglectful parents, the kid eats 2 or 3 chocolates before a meal. And then, say, half an hour or an hour before dinner, maybe you're going to a party or something, their blood sugar spikes, they get a false sense of fullness, and then when it's time to eat, they don't feel hungry, they have no appetite. It's not their fault, because they feel full. It's not their fault, it's yours, okay. Then they won't eat. Again, like a constant inspector, keep an eye on things so the child doesn't eat sweets or filling snacks before mealtime. After that, it's fine. Tell them. Tell them, I'll give you this chocolate after lunch, or I'll give you this ice cream after lunch, or whatever it is, sweets, candy, cake, whatever. I'll give this to you, but after dinner or after lunch. Once you've eaten your lunch, sure, it's right here, it's yours. I'll give it to you, okay. Just by telling them that, most kids feel reassured, and their appetite won't be ruined. meaning they won't lose their appetite for their meal. So be careful, be careful. Even if you want to give them junk food, go ahead, but tell them the time. Now, the interesting thing is that when it's time for the child to eat, you'll find their appetite hasn't been spoiled. In any case, they'll eat as much as they need. Now, I'm not saying they'll eat a huge amount, but they'll eat what they like and what they need, and after the meal, their craving for that sweet or that junk food will be less. Or they'll forget about it entirely and won't eat it, or if they do, they'll eat less of it. Look, this is a very key and golden tip. If parents really pay close attention to this approach and actually commit to doing it consistently, you'll find that 80 or even 90% of those frustrating daily struggles with your child's picky eating habits will simply be solved. It really ensures the child's healthy growth over the long term, makes sure they are eating regular, balanced meals like lunch and dinner every single day, and helps introduce at least a little bit of variety into their diet instead of just relying on, junk food or snacks. As they often say, this approach really helps guarantee that the child grows well, develops properly, and gets all the different essential nutrients they need to thrive throughout their childhood. So, I've spent more time on the ones that are more common and explained them in more detail. So I said, if it's real, it either has psychological, environmental, or upbringing origins, which I explained very briefly, or that last one, which is the least common, and it's interesting that parents' minds go straight to this last one from the start, thinking that their child must be sick. Whereas, first of all, no, you should look, maybe you're the one who's mistaken. 2, if you're not mistaken, first you have to look at the emotional, psychological, and, let's say, environmental and upbringing aspects to see if the fault was yours, if you weren't careful with them. Like I said, the kid isn't paying attention and chews gum. Well, gum has sugar in it, right? They chew it, and blood sugar. I mean, how big is a kid's body? Anyway, their blood sugar goes up, giving them a false sense of fullness. Don't forget this. I've repeated this. Don't forget it. Well, the last one, which is less common, is physical causes. Now, let's assume that, yes, there is an illness here that has caused this child's appetite to decrease. Well, this is either acute or chronic. What does acute mean? It means, for example, the child gets gastroenteritis, a stomach and intestinal infection, for instance, well, for a week, 10 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, or even 15 days, it doesn't matter. Well, this comes along with other symptoms. It's not like their appetite just disappears and nothing else happens. No, well, the child might have a fever, stomach cramps, or nausea, or diarrhea, or whatever, for example. Or just imagine a viral illness that isn't stomach or intestinal. Well, that also reduces appetite, you know. But like I said, it has other symptoms. It's not just a loss of appetite. Loss of appetite is just one of several symptoms, right? This is the acute state, where because there are other symptoms besides this, parents realize, hey, they've got some kind of illness. So they take them in to get it checked out, and they treat the illness, and once the illness is resolved, the loss of appetite clears up too. But chronic, so that was the acute state. Chronic means that this child, for example, let's say this child is 5 years old now, and they were eating well up until they were 3 or 4. That's how the parents will describe it. Now, let's say they're 6 months, a year, or maybe a year and a half old, and their food intake has really dropped. Then you go and look at their height and weight growth chart and see, oh yeah, there's been a drop-off, right? This is the rarest. Well, it's less common than the others, but it still happens. This is a real physical illness, right? Now, since various diseases can cause this, in this situation, the child needs to undergo tests and be examined by a doctor to figure out where the issue lies. It's a physical illness, meaning it's not psychological, it's not about upbringing, it's not environmental, it's not psychiatric, and it's not just a misconception by the parents. It could be various different diseases. A lot of different illnesses can have chronic, long-term loss of appetite as one of their symptoms. But as I said, these illnesses don't just have one single symptom like loss of appetite. Loss of appetite is certainly an important symptom if it becomes persistent or prolonged, but from this point on, it needs to be investigated. This isn't something where I can just list them off for you right now. This. Well, that would take forever. So, a doctor needs to examine you to tell you what it is. The main message of this video and this file I've just recorded was for you to rule out all those initial factors yourself. Meaning, you should be able to, as they say, prove it, make sure it's not those things. Okay. Then you can worry. Okay. This means that with my explanation, in 80 or 90% of cases, you'll realize there wasn't actually anything to worry about. See you in the next file. Thanks.